Is that on? I would know in the back of my head and from my experience and my training that the only thing, the only medicine which will touch this specific illness is extreme suffering.
All right. Well, good morning.
Good morning, good man.
So, Robert, can you tell me about the American disease, as you call it?
Painful subject. Very interesting one, though frightening. My observations and ideas about it are evolving. I'm puzzled by it. I think it started out consciously when I heard from somebody, and this is years ago, that in Europe, Americans are more or less affectionately known as a species of Bubis americanus, the American child. That scared me. But there is a collective illness sweeping over America that is unique to the American continent. And it's sweeping over the whole world at epidemic speed.
Through the power of Hollywood and Madison Avenue, or just does it seem attractive to others from the outside, or?
Certainly all of those are involved. And I don't know whether to call them causes or symptoms. I don't know. I'm too close to the whole subject to be very objective about it. You can't see your own illness worth anything. But I suffer from that illness. We'll try and define it, though it's chancy. And most of what I know about it is my own struggles to escape it or to cure it inside myself. Dr. Jung had an interesting idea that there's such a thing as psychic weather. I'm not sure he ever called it that, but it's my terminology for it. It's a good analogy because in the same sense that we're all affected by weather simultaneously, and we're helpless in the face of it. One can get out one's umbrella and one can go indoors and things like that, but we're still subject. We're at the mercy of the weather. And it's easily demonstrated that one's mood is affected by the weather. If it's a damp, drizzly morning, people come into the workplace a bit downcast and often making jokes about it all. It was Dr. Jung's observation that there's a kind of psychic weather, a surge of optimism running through the nation. The Dow Jones goes up and nobody knows why. Or the Dow Jones suddenly takes a plunge. Nobody knows why either. There are other forces that move that odd barometer up and down. But there is such a thing as psychic weather. And there's a German term which is all but inaccessible to other languages, zeitgeist. Translated directly means zeit, time, geist, spirit or ghost.
Would another word be collective mood?
Yes. Those are very hard things to chart or to observe. It's suddenly fashionable to talk about the increase in the warming trend. Well, you can get your thermometers out and get a pretty good look at that, though people are still arguing, debating about it. But zeitgeist, or a collective psychological storm, is a very, very interesting thing to watch. We have virtually no language for it. People don't like to talk about it. It's too ephemeral. It slips through the fingers too easily. I think there are collective illnesses which go rampaging through the psyche of groups of people.
Would Nazi Germany be a good example of that?
Probably the best example within living memory. A whole nation of people really went psychotic. Had a patient who grew up her teenage years just before World War II in Germany. And of course we were mopping up the damage of that in her psyche. But she was explaining, taught me a lot. She said, Robert, even if you know better, and everybody in the block is yelling themselves hoarse, Heil Hitler, and waving Nazi flags, even if you know better, pretty soon you're howling Heil Hitler and waving your flag. Those things are contagious.
Why is that? It must appeal to something archetypal.
It is. There are waves of, and my vocabulary fails me there, energy or archetypal structures or whatever that go rushing through the psyche. Freudians observed that around the year 1900, when Freud was making such a big impact on the Western world, hysteria was the big illness. And they comment, you hardly ever have a case of hysteria anymore. Schizophrenia is our illness of choice, so to speak. Well, if one's of a materialistic mindset, you can find all kinds of reasons for that. But being the introvert that I am, I like to think from the inside out.
Mm-hmm.
That's an interesting subject we'll pick up in a minute. I'm more inclined to think that it's a psychic storm that's gone through our society, and what the extrovert is likely to explain as the cause of the change from hysteria and its symptoms to schizophrenia and its symptoms is a result of the psychic storm, rather than to argue the other way around. But anybody can get lost in which comes first, the chicken or the egg kind of talk. And that's very interesting to watch, because extroverts like to reason from the outside in. Introverts like to reason from the inside out. We're schizophrenic because of the lifestyle, so the extrovert would say. And my own prejudice, and I label it as such, is that there's a schizophrenic wave in the world psyche, or the world soul, so to speak. And that has produced the outer effects which we're having to struggle with now. Well, that's a fruitless argument, and I'm stuck in my prejudice, but one's bias is likely to affect a great deal of what one does. It's best to know what your prejudice is and be aware of it. So the American illness, terrible subject. Some of its immediate symptoms that attracts one to use such words as illness, national characteristics, or racial characteristics. One of them, the biggest one, in my jaundiced viewpoint, is loneliness. Everybody's lonely. We make Herculean efforts to disprove our loneliness, not let somebody else see it. And the entertainments to dispel it or to hide it are absolutely legion. We have an enormous, gigantic entertainment industry to keep us diverted so we won't have to sit and stew in our loneliness. It's frightening to watch the tendency in movies. I was enamored of movies in my teens, as any teenager would be. I got to disliking them along midway. Somebody gave me a DVD system a couple of years ago. It's a new addiction. It gives me the power to go back and look at many movies that were top scale along the way from 1920 onward. And it's so interesting to see what the sweep of movies is doing now. They're getting faster, for one thing. People talk faster. The shift from one scene to another gets more and more rapid just in the last 10 years or so. And the jerk, I don't know any other word to describe it, that occurs in me as the movie camera goes from one scene to another more rapidly. Every time I see a new movie, I fancy that the shift of scenes and the rapidity has increased. And the speed at which people speak in all circumstances has increased a lot. Lately, I've been spontaneously telling somebody on the other end of a telephone conversation, especially if it's somebody unknown to me or maybe an advertisement going on, please, will you slow down? And I'm finding out that people can't do it, or with great effort, they'll slow down for 30 seconds, and then they're up to 150 miles an hour again. Nice young guy came to me some years ago, and I said, for God's sakes, man, slow down. He came to see me the other day. I think his efforts to slow down had perhaps only just compensated for the collective speed up. And he says, yeah, I've slowed down. I said, yeah, it's 100 miles an hour now. He didn't know what I was talking about. A little hurt by that.
So this is an interesting parallel, just like we're unaware of, or mostly unaware of how fast we're talking and
Yes.
how short our attention span. Most
Yes.
people would probably deny that they're lonely if you ask them.
Almost anybody would deny it, yes, in a kind of desperation.
Does that mean they're unaware of it?
Most people are at least tangentially aware of it. But it's only after one gets to know someone pretty well and gains their confidence, or they gain their confidence in themselves, that they'll tell you how desperately lonely they are.
So what is your feeling concerning the dynamic that is creating this loneliness?
Yes, okay. That's extremely interesting to me and overrides my vocabulary instantly. I do my best with it. The process of differentiation, dividing out, taking smaller and smaller increments of something and subjecting it to a kind of microscopic mentality, began somewhere back yonder. I wish I were scholar enough to go further, but I'm pretty well aware of this progression. It didn't begin with the Reformation, but the Reformation gave a great impetus to it. Divide, individualism, and it just about the time of the Copernican revolution, which nearly cost Copernicus his life. He was brash enough to say, no, the Earth is not the center of the solar system. The sun is. Well, he was nearly hanged for that, and I don't know or I've forgotten the details of it, but he barely wriggled his way out of that and saved his life. But the Copernican revolution, which virtually everybody, any educated, any Westerner certainly agrees is a sensible observation of how things are. The Earth is a subsidiary piece of the solar system. And it makes best sense, and you can explain more things by presuming that the sun is the center, unmoving center of our immediately known universe. Astronomers have to think in different terms from that now, but it was a big step to presume that the sun was the center of the whole play rather than the Earth.
What psychological implications does that have?
Very frightening ones if one can use it as a model or analogy. Really, all I have learned on this desperate subject thus far is that we have not made a Copernican revolution psychologically.
I see.
We still think that the ego is the center of the universe, and everything else revolves around that. That has increased in power, in domination, increased rapidly since, well, my view only goes back as far as the Reformation, and that rather shakily.
If we believe our ego is the center of our inner universe,
The universe.
that essentially, the universe, it essentially cuts us off from the universe, from the true universe.
That's right. I think it's that.
And that would create, so in a sense it's a religious crisis.
Yeah. The Reformation was, in a way, the vehement statement that man is the center of his religious life, not the church and not an authority, the priest or the Pope. And if one looks at the Reformation as that statement, it's terrifying. Of course, one's going to breed up a bunch of isolated human beings with great benefit on some levels. We traded one value or safety for another one at the Reformation. When one focuses down on an individual man and his powers, He can talk directly to God. He doesn't have to do it through a priest or through a system or through a church. That gives him enormous power. This was such a revolutionary idea in my head that I wandered around in a state of shock for a long time.
Wasn't it Dr. Young who felt that most psychological problems that brought people to him were of a religious nature, a religious crisis of some sort?
Yes. I can trace it back to my satisfaction to the Reformation. And I can turn around and make a big argument from the Protestant point of view that they needed a Reformation. Catholicism had gone so rotten down to the core that they needed a shake-up. They needed a shake-up.
So how do we make the leap from that to what I think I hear you saying is a uniquely American illness? Or is it not uniquely American, but just focused to a high degree or most intense in the American psyche?
We seem to be the band leader in this. Again, one gets into a dead paralysis if he tries to say that America started it or chicken or egg. It gets into an impasse.
But we're exhibiting it to a
Yeah.
high degree.
And electing to sell it. Teach the world our view of freedom and democracy, which are both very good ideas, but they're so powerful that even at best with a supreme optimism, it's not sure whether they work or not. But the Reformation, in a way, went Copernican revolution in reverse. It took the focus on me, I, and mine, and put it on the sun. Well, the Copernican revolution, in a way, said the world's not the center of the universe. The sun is. And even that's full of holes, theoretically, because science has gone a long way from that, and not even the sun is the center of the universe. Better quit trying to call anything the center of the universe.
Start talking about infinity.
Yes. If one wants to make tentative translations or analogies from these things, mankind has been reinventing God along the way. He has to throw the old one out at each turn of the way. The value of the Copernican revolution is that one gets a much more focused and immediate center of gravity. The old system, still held by Catholicism, is that you keep peace with God by way of the church. And the church holds the authority, holds your soul in its hands, and decides whether you go to heaven and hell. Pretty good sales point. But the Protestant point of view became, this is immensely complex. The Protestant says, okay, you work this out with God. You don't have to go to an authority, either a priest or the church in general, to work this out. And that's a closer range focus, so to speak, and invites many, many advances, much advance of consciousness and a much advance of clarity. And much more responsibility lands on the person. Well, from the Reformation on, one can point out focal points where this shift of gravity, center of gravity, changed more and more to a subjective point of view. The French Enlightenment and Sir Isaac Newton and various points like that along the way have been a furthering of this basic trend of bringing the center of things, or the center of consciousness. I'm jumping back and forth between images shamelessly, but it's the only way I can encompass some of these things. It's been jumping, altering this focal length ever since the Reformation, and undoubtedly before that, but I'm lost at that magnitude.
So the responsibility shifted to the individual.
Yes.
But the individual is losing sight of God. It's losing sight of the larger universe.
Is usurping the place of God in its old definition. And this was a great advance. Individuals are much more powerful now, increasingly so. But they're increasingly vulnerable and heavily weighted. So as soon as you invent an individual or an individual attitude, you have invented loneliness. This has gone so far that modern people scarcely are aware of any much sense or enough sense of belongingness. The hue and cry that comes out of almost any intelligent person now. I want a sense of belongingness. I want somebody who understands me. I want somebody like me. I want somebody.
And yet everywhere you look around, everyone just seems to be twirling in their own orbit.
Increasingly.
Self-absorbed with their own
Yeah.
issues of living and
Yes.
responsibilities.
Fill up my loneliness, please, but don't touch my individuality. That's the big paradox that's facing marriage now. That basic institution of binding individual people as soon as they reach early maturity into a unit that's more than just me, my, and mine.
So what can what tools are available to an individual, to an American? It seems like a Herculean task, not only to find a proper relationship with the larger universe, with God, but also fight the weather, the psychic weather, as you say, because of our innate tendency to want to belong.
Yeah. Just within my lifetime, the unspoken custom has taken place of not just a car per family, but a car per person. It's hard to run a modern household with just one car. And that's only an analogy of what's happening on a big scale. I think it's approaching a TV screen per person.
So this goes a long way to explain the dissatisfaction, the restlessness, the consumerism.
The advertising industry pounces on this with great intensity. I mentioned in a lecture once that Madison Avenue was the purveyor of discontent.
I was just going to say, if you had a television, you would see that moment by moment. It feels like we're being told what, or our own prejudices are being, or our own sickness is being reinforced. Again, the chicken and the egg thing, right?
True.
They didn't invent it, but they're certainly, maybe they didn't invent it, but they're certainly exploiting it.
At that lecture, a man came up after the lecture, and he was obviously shaken to the core. He said, "I'm an advertising manager, and you have absolutely just shaken me speechless." It's true. That's only the very raw side of our modern structure. We have a whole industry to make sure we stay discontented. If we got contented, we might stop buying things. So there's always a new fashion in clothing or a new fashion in even drugs. And it's this discontent, of which loneliness is the most visible and the most universal, that I call the American illness. And it's increasing breakneck speed and is exporting at lightning speed. Even European countries catch our latest fashions and sneer at them for 10 years and adopt them. And I think I understand at a profound level that this individualism business, which we've taken on as a new religion, is doing some wonderful things. I wouldn't be alive today if some of the products of this, I'm scared to call it the American illness now, hadn't been invented or weren't around. So it's a huge paradox. I had fun the other day, just the other day. I have to explain first that feeling and intuition are my primary faculties. So don't expect good thinking out of me. I produce some good products, but when they look like thinking, they're generally feeling and intuition and sensation pulled together into kind of an amalgam, which looks surprisingly like thinking, but it isn't. So the result of that is that if I'm at my best, if I'm feeling good, if I'm in good relationship, if I'm functioning well, I often know things just simply by the fact of knowing them without ever having thought about it or experimented with it or, so to speak, earned it. Most of what people find attractive in me come in that intuitive kind of outburst in me. I never take notes to a lecture because it would just turn into a lecture of information. You'd get better than mine out of books. But I see sometimes when things are going well, things seem to pop out of me. Well, something popped out of me that surprised me as much as the person I was talking to. I'm savoring it and enjoying it, laughing a bit with it. Somebody asked me, do you think you can reconcile religion and science? Well, I hadn't ever been faced just slam bang with that question, but my intuitive faculty kicked in. I said, yes. Really? Yes. Then this person was going to nail me down. I felt the nails going in. I was beginning to get uneasy because I don't know how. But he said, well, how? How do you reconcile religion and science? I remember a cartoon or a not very good joke from quite a while ago. A priest and a scientist are at a cocktail party, and the scientist is telling the priest, I've never been able to prove scientifically that religion exists. And the priest is said to have replied, well, that's very strange, because I've never been able to prove religiously that science exists. End of conversation. Well, my instantaneous reply, which was beyond my up to that point capacity of thinking, was, it's easy because they're both illusions. I didn't know that 2 seconds before, but I know it now. They're both mythologies. I didn't know that. And I'm savoring it now, and my rudimentary thinking process has gotten hold of it and thinking it out and having a good time with it.
So what does your intuition tell you about this American illness and what's in store?
Okay. You got a week? The diagnosis is that we have failed psychologically the Copernican revolution. So I think what's happened is that we've failed to make the evolutionary advance psychologically that would conform to the Copernican revolution. We think, and I don't see any signs of a collective change in this, that one's ego is the center of the universe, and we act like it, and we've stolen the fire of heaven, so to speak. Forgive me bouncing around between levels so outrageously, but it's the only way I know to think. And we have gained wonderful, wonderful advantages. I pay tribute to some of those advantages. I wouldn't be alive to this day without them. But we've taken on a dreadful, apparently, I don't think it's actually so, but apparently insoluble agony as well. And that's chiefly loneliness in many manifestations.
It's a cultural inflation.
Yeah. And it's rapidly getting worse. Somebody pinned me down to try and talk more intelligently about this than I had been. I said, well, if an individual came to my consulting room with this illness, and that's mostly what people come to my consulting room with, if it boils down to that, I would know in the back of my head and from my experience and my training that the only thing, the only medicine which will touch this specific illness is extreme suffering. Yeah, I do know an answer. Virtually nobody will take it.
And you don't mean the type of suffering brought on by twisting somebody's arm, but a suffering that's transformative, or at best would be transformative.
Yes.
At worst would be fatal.
You die of the off side effect. That can happen. Or suicide, or what's a pretty grim prospect. And that suffering jumped back and forth between my levels, I beg your pardon, can come on many levels. A bicycle smash up, loss of a marriage, or the death of a loved one, or just that existential gnawingness which people talk so much about now. The smarter one is, the greater is one's capacity for suffering, because that's his only known medicine.
What can is there a collective solution? I guess is what I'm getting at. I know that Dr. Young would say that it would have to start within each individual to take to change the center of balance from the ego to the self or the broader universe.
Or a collective suffering. I think every war is a clumsy, brutish way of trying to accomplish that.
And as we speak, America is in the midst of a war on terrorism. We're in Iraq, Afghanistan. We're 5 years past the events of 9/11. Do you see in this what we're talking about?
Precisely. It hasn't turned me into an optimist. It's my own, I was going to say private feeling, but it's not all that uncommon. Feel that we are in a contrived war right now, which may be a frantic and immensely clumsy effort to attain the suffering that we need, like clutching at the medicine.
Yet in our collective mind, we see a terrorist as someone who's just out for our blood, and something must be done.
I'm not on the in on these things, and I'm not sure I could stand it if I were. But so many of these emergencies which keep our adrenaline going are contrived. That's what propaganda is about. It makes me sick.
So the objective the reality of a national enemy is there, but they're also a convenient receptacle for our own darker shadow and natures.
You're being
the devil out there.
Yeah. You're being very generous. The worst is that we arrange for those things, construct them. I don't know what to do about this. I have no intelligence on the subject of what to do politically or economically, socially. I don't know. I tend to fall into a bad depression if I get going on that. But I know what an individual can do, and that's where I'm investing my interest and my energy. To carry this subject on one more step, I stumbled into the word origin of the word suffer, and it originally meant to allow, not to wring your hands and howl and wail, but to suffer. That even still exists in at least the King James Bible. Suffer the little children to come unto you. Allow. But that meaning and that possibility is evaporated out of our common speech.
I've heard you speak of happiness also, as to, if I understood you correctly, to mean to accept what is.
Yes.
Just
So all you need for happiness is what happens. They're synonymous meanings. That doesn't sell well either.
no.